They had always found polite ways to say it, as if softness could dull the blade of rejection. Too old, past her prime. Not what men were looking for anymore. Clara Whitmore learned early that age, when worn by a woman, was treated like a quiet failure, something to apologize for without ever naming aloud. She was 42 when the last man she dated smiled awkwardly over coffee and told her she deserved someone with a calmer pace of life, which she understood meant someone who didn't remind him of time passing. After that, she stopped dating entirely. The world had already decided her value, and she was tired of pleading her case. She sold her small city house, packed her belongings into a rust-streaked pickup she barely knew how to drive, and moved to a dying town in eastern Montana where no one asked questions, and the land stretched wide enough to swallow disappointment whole. The job posting had been simple: caretaker needed for a remote ranch property.
Light maintenance.
Bookkeeping, animal oversight, no photo required, no age preference listed. Clara took it as a mercy. The ranch belonged to a man named Eli Mercer, though she didn't meet him when she arrived. The property sat miles from the nearest town, its fences leaning like tired shoulders against the wind. The house was old but sturdy, built by hands that believed in endurance more than beauty. Clara liked it instantly. It felt honest. The foreman, a gruff older man named Tom, showed her the basics and warned her not to expect much interaction with the owner. "He keeps to himself," Tom said, not unkindly. "Lost his wife 5 years back. Been half-broken ever since." Clara nodded, recognizing the language of grief. She had lived inside it long enough to know its shape. Days passed quietly. Clara rose early, cooked simple meals, tracked expenses, tended the animals with a careful patience that came naturally to her. No one looked at her twice. No one evaluated her worth by the softness of her skin or the promise of youth. For the first time in years, she felt invisible in a way that was freeing rather than cruel. She didn't know Eli was watching her, not at first. He saw her from a distance, standing near the barn at dusk, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, moving with calm efficiency. She wasn't beautiful in the way magazines demanded, but there was something steady about her presence, something that didn't demand anything from him. That alone felt dangerous. Eli Mercer had stopped believing in beginnings. At 47, with a ruined knee, a ranch bleeding money, and a heart that still woke screaming some nights, he believed only in getting through the day. When his wife died suddenly, aneurysm, no warning, the world had not paused. The cattle still needed feeding. The land still demanded labor. People still expected him to function. He did, because stopping meant drowning. He hadn't touched another woman since. Not out of loyalty, not exactly. More because he didn't know how to be seen again. Love had split him open once, and the scar tissue was thick and unforgiving. The first time they spoke, it was over a broken fence post. Clara was trying to reset it alone when Eli rode up, irritation already simmering. He expected incompetence. He'd hired enough temporary help to recognize it. What he didn't expect was the way she met his eyes without flinching. "I could use leverage," she said simply, nodding toward the post. No apology, no defensiveness. He dismounted without a word and helped her finish the job. Their hands brushed briefly. Neither reacted. It felt oddly respectful, like an unspoken agreement not to pretend this moment was anything more than it was. After that, small interactions followed. Passing each other in the yard, a nod, a shared silence at the table when schedules overlapped. Clara noticed the limp. Eli noticed the way she listened when others spoke, never interrupting, never diminishing. There was no flirtation, no careful testing of boundaries. It was as if both had lived long enough to know how fragile peace was and didn't want to break it by wanting too much. But the town noticed. They always did. A woman alone was suspicious. A woman over 40 was invisible until she wasn't. At the general store, Clara overheard whispers. "Too old for him," one woman muttered, not realizing Clara stood close enough to hear. He could do better if he tried. Clara didn't react. She paid for her supplies and left. She had spent a lifetime learning how to absorb judgment without bleeding. Eli heard it too, eventually. The sideways looks, the assumptions. He surprised himself by feeling Anger, not because he cared what people thought of him, but because they spoke about Clara as if she weren't real, as if she were an object misplaced, rather than a human being with weight and history. That night he found her in the kitchen, quietly mending a tear in a work glove. "You don't have to stay here," he said abruptly. She looked up, confused. "If people are bothering you." Clara studied him for a moment, then shook her head. "I didn't come here to be chosen," she said. "I came here to work." Something in her tone, firm, unbending, settled into him. He realized then how rare it was to meet someone who didn't want anything from him at all. Weeks deepened into a rhythm. The land changed colors. Autumn crept in softly. And somewhere between shared meals and unspoken understanding, something dangerous began to grow. Not desire exactly, but recognition. Eli saw the way Clara carried disappointment without bitterness. Clara saw the way Eli moved through pain without spectacle. They were both tired people in a world obsessed with beginnings, quietly learning that maybe endings weren't the only stories worth telling. One evening, after a storm cut the power, they sat by lantern light in the living room. The silence stretched comfortably until Eli spoke. "They say you're too old," he said, not looking at her. Clara didn't flinch this time either. "They've been saying that for a while," he swallowed. "They're wrong." The words surprised them both. She met his gaze then, really met it, and for the first time the air shifted, not with promise, not with fantasy, but with something steadier, something honest. Outside, the wind howled across the ranch, but inside, two people who had been discarded by different versions of the same world sat quietly, unaware that everything they believed about love was already beginning to crack. After the power returned, neither of them mentioned the conversation again, but its presence lingered between them like warmth left behind after a fire has burned low. Clara went back to her routine, yet something subtle had shifted. She noticed how Eli slowed his pace when she was nearby, as if unconsciously matching her rhythm. He noticed how she hummed softly while working, a habit that surfaced only when she felt safe. These were small things, but they accumulated, forming a quiet intimacy neither had planned for nor named. The first crack in that fragile balance came when Clara fell. It was a simple accident, wet ground, a misplaced step near the barn, but the sound of her hitting the earth reached Eli before he saw her. Panic surged through him with a force that startled him. He was at her side in seconds, hands shaking as he helped her sit up. "Don't move," he ordered, voice rough. She winced but waved him off. "I'm fine," she said, though her ankle already swelling told a different story. He carried her without asking, lifting her as if she weighed nothing, and in that moment, the distance they had so carefully maintained vanished. Clara felt the strength in his arms, the tension in his jaw, the unspoken fear radiating from him. She realized then that she mattered to him, not as a worker, not as a convenience, but as a person whose pain unsettled his carefully controlled world. The injury forced closeness. Eli insisted she rest while he handled her duties, grumbling but attentive, setting meals in front of her with an awkward gentleness that made her smile when he wasn't looking. At night, Clara lay awake listening to the house settle, aware of his presence in the next room in a way she hadn't been aware of. Another man in years. She reminded herself not to read into it. Wanting had always been her downfall. Expectation turned hope into humiliation. She told herself this was kindness, nothing more. But Eli struggled too. He found himself lingering near her door at night, fist raised as if to knock, then lowering it again. He told himself it was responsibility, concern, nothing else. Yet memories of his wife surfaced unexpectedly, not as pain this time, but as a comparison he hadn't intended to make. His wife had been vibrant, demanding, full of motion. Clara was different, quiet, grounded, present, and that difference didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like relief. When Clara could walk again, she insisted on returning to work, and Eli didn't argue. He watched her move carefully, noting the resilience in every step. The town's whispers grew louder as their proximity became visible. One afternoon, a man at the feed store made a crude joke about Eli settling. Eli didn't think. His fist moved before his mind caught up. He walked away with scraped knuckles and a burning certainty that something inside him had crossed a line. He wasn't defending reputation. He was defending her. Clara noticed the bruises later that night. "What happened?" she asked. Eli hesitated, then shrugged. Nothing worth talking about. She didn't push. Instead, she fetched a cloth and cleaned his knuckles gently, her touch steady and sure. Eli felt something unravel then. A knot he hadn't known was still tight. He looked at her hands, scarred from work, capable and kind, and wondered how the world had decided she was past deserving love. The realization hit him fully. One cold morning as they stood, watching the cattle move across the frost-bitten field, Clara spoke softly about leaving the city, about being tired of feeling like she had missed her chance at something fundamental. "At some point," she said, "you stop hoping. It's easier." Eli turned to her, heart pounding. "I don't want you to stop," he said before he could stop himself. She looked startled, then guarded. "Eli," he cut himself off, breath uneven. "I don't know what this is," he admitted, "but I know I see you, and I don't think you're too old for anything." Silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Clara felt tears threaten but held them back. She had been seen before, or thought she had, only to be set aside. "Seeing isn't the same as choosing," she said quietly. Eli nodded. "I know. I'm trying to learn how to choose again." That night, Clara sat alone in her room, staring at the ceiling, heart racing with fear and hope tangled together. She knew the risk. She knew how easily this could end in another lesson about limits and loss. But she also knew something else, something new and terrifying. For the first time in years, someone wasn't asking her to be less, and that possibility refused to be ignored. Outside, the ranch lay silent under the stars, unaware that 2 lives long, resigned to solitude, stood at the edge of something neither of them had believed was meant for people like them.